Hi everyone, my name is Terry Westphal and today is Tuesday, which means it's time to discuss our book of the week, which is The Summer We Fell by Elizabeth O'Rourke. So first, this is the spoiler-free section. If you haven't read this book yet, don't worry about it, it won't be spoiled for you here. There will be some spoiler-related things that I want to discuss, but that'll be later on in the video and you will get plenty of warning. If you'd like to join in on any of the discussions, send me your thoughts, comments, or even a short video clip of you discussing the book, then I'll list the next upcoming 4 books in the description below. So this book was not at all what I was expecting it to be. As usual, I went into this completely blind and ignorant to what the book was about, so based off the cover alone, I was expecting this very easy to read romance, maybe even a palate cleanser type of read, something that is easy and relatively low stakes, but that's not what this book was. What I didn't expect was for this book to be so emotional, heavy and layered, and while it was still easy to read in terms of writing style, it did discuss some very serious topics and I don't know, it just had a lot more depth and emotional weight than I anticipated. I rated this book 4.5 stars, and a huge reason for that was because I did become so invested in the characters and their story. And Summer We Fell is told across 2 different timelines, split relatively evenly between the past and the present. It follows Julia as she reflects on a pivotal summer in her life and the long-lasting consequences of the decisions she made, particularly around love, grief and survival. At its core, this story is about relationships, romantic, familial, as well as found family, and how they can shape who you become. It explores love, regret, trauma, and what it takes to maybe finally believe that you might deserve better. If I was to compare this to any other book, I would probably say something like One Day, combined with something a little bit more romance-focused like Happy Place. It's very character-driven and doesn't shy away from those deeper, darker topics. One of the biggest surprises for me was just how much I enjoyed the dual timeline, because it is not something that I usually gravitate towards. In fact, usually I tend to find that I prefer one timeline over the other and I get impatient to get back to the better one, but here I think it worked beautifully. The past and the present felt equally important, and together it painted a really nice picture of who Julia is and why she made the choices that she did. I wasn't just invested in what was happening now, but also, what had happened in the past to shape her. This book was so incredibly relatable, even in situations that weren't directly applicable to my own life. The emotions felt real, honest and grounded, and even in the situations where they didn't necessarily feel relatable, I think that the author did a really good job of helping you to understand the characters, so you never really felt disconnected from them. Yes, the story was still somewhat predictable, but honestly, I didn't care. The tension was still there, I was still hooked, and I wanted to see how things would unfold. I was invested in the characters, and I cared about what they were going through. And while I say that it's predictable, there were still parts that I did not see coming. The book does a great job of exploring abusive and toxic dynamics, and not always in super obvious or dramatic ways. Some are more subtle and insidious ways that creep up over time. It shows how hard it can be to leave bad situations, especially when you're feeling indebted, trapped, or just emotionally worn down. It also explores how long it can take for someone to realise that they might actually deserve the things that they want, and also how terrifying that realization can be. So, as for the question, would I recommend the book? Yes, absolutely. If you're expecting a fluffy, surface level romance, then this might surprise you. But if you're open to something more emotional, character driven and thoughtful, then I think that this one is quite a powerful read. It's definitely still accessible and easy to read, it just had a lot more depth than I originally anticipated. So will I be reading any more by Elizabeth O'Rourke? Definitely, this book impressed me and I would happily read more by this author. So earlier on in the video I said that you would get plenty of warning for any upcoming spoilers. Now this is that moment, so if you haven't read this book yet, I would suggest going and doing that first, because beyond this point there will absolutely be spoilers. So I'll be honest, I could see where this book was headed. I knew that Danny was probably going to die, and I knew that it probably would have something to do with Juliet and Luke cheating. They're clearly a better match, but that doesn't mean that I condone what they did, but it also doesn't mean that I believe it was their fault what happened to Danny. But what worked really well for me was that even knowing what was probably going to happen, I was still on edge. I think that the tension building up to that moment was really effective. Danny's death wasn't Juliet or Luke's fault, and I feel like the book does a very good job of making that clear, while the guilt and the fallout still felt very real. Like, Juliet wasn't staying because she wanted to, she felt like leaving was impossible. Like, every time she got close to escape, something would happen to pull her back. One of the most compelling parts of the story for me was Juliet's home life. She came from a truly horrible, abusive childhood, and at first when Danny and his family bring her in, it feels like a rescue. But over time, it becomes clear that she's traded an abusive environment for a toxic one. She's constantly made to feel like she owes them everything, and she's expected to be grateful and compliant and subdued, and Danny's only really interested in her so long as she's quiet and is moulded into exactly what he wants her to be. And then there's Donna, who I thought was a really interesting character because she was never overtly malicious or cruel in obvious ways. But there are double standards and unfair treatment and moments of ignorance that just make it a very unhealthy environment for Juliet. And I think it raises an interesting point that harm isn't always malicious intent. It's not always intentional. Juliet and Luke are both very flawed characters. They make some very poor decisions and hurt other people, but the book does a very good job of showing how years of toxicity and guilt and emotional manipulation can warp your sense of self and your understanding of what you deserve. I also didn't understand until closer to the end why Juliet couldn't just be with Luke now, finally, after all these years. But then the blackmail genuinely caught me off guard, and it was one of those moments that I didn't see coming, and it just made everything click together. And then we get that moment in the end where they're finally allowed to be together, and it felt satisfying, it felt earned, and it felt emotional. The summer we felt was so much more than I expected it to be. It was emotional, it was thoughtful and messy and deeply human, and it wasn't a light romance, it was a beautiful, impactful one. But let me know what you thought of the book. Did it surprise you as much as it surprised me? Next week we're discussing Everyone in the Group Chat Dies by L.M. Chilton. So don't forget to get your thoughts and comments in by Sunday the 8th of February at the latest to be a part of the discussion. You can now do this on YouTube, TikTok, Instagram, or Discord. The following week will be Faebound, but don't forget if you do need a little bit longer to read a book, we do now list next 4 books down below, along with the discussion dates. That way you can choose the genre that best suits you, and the best time frame to read it in. Thank you all for joining. If you like this video, please don't forget to like and subscribe, it's always appreciated, and I will see you next week. Bye! If you like romance, fantasy, or even thriller, basically anything fiction book related, then I suggest you head on over to the channel's intro video, where you can find out more information on how you can take part in this online book club. We announce books at least 4 weeks in advance, and we accept your bookish feedback in a wide manner of ways. Post your comment below a video, send in a voice note, or even send me a short video clip of you discussing the book. Alternatively, you can just send me a direct message.